So the second part of this presentation is what I call misguided good intentions. The 17th Amendment reads, the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state elected by the people thereof. It's not the entire 17th Amendment, but anyway, it was ratified April 8th, 1913. What else happened in 1913? Well, as you know, the 16th Amendment was ratified. We just covered that earlier. Woodrow Wilson was inaugurated as President of the United States. He brought along with him his appointment to Secretary of the State. This Secretary of the State was responsible for several things pertaining to the 16th and 17th Amendment. Then we also find a Senate that later in 1913 approved the Federal Reserve Act, and that probably with an asterisk because only 3 people actually voted for it in a move that's got very questionable constitutional backing. So that was another thing. Woodrow Wilson was president, and the Federal Reserve was created. So 1913 was an unfortunate year, let's just say the least. So what did the 17th Amendment change? It changed senators from being chosen by state legislatures to being chosen by popular vote. Well, that doesn't sound so bad, so what's wrong with this? And the answer to the question, we must first examine the purpose of the Senate. What is the function of the Senate? Well, the House of Representatives is designed to represent the people. Thus, representatives are enumerated based on population and elected as popular vote. The Senate represents states as co-equal members of the Union, thus they were originally appointed by state legislatures. Also, the purpose of the Senate is to protect the minority. The Senate generally requires 60% of the vote in order to pass the Senate, and each state is equally represented. Now, you got to ask yourself, in Madison's context, what was the minority? And the minority in his context was the states with the least population. Today, that would be Wyoming, Idaho, Alaska, and yes, Hawaii, but other states, West Virginia, and states like that would be in the minority. Tennessee's kind of in between. We have a fairly average population here. Is also to slow the progress of bills to allow more thorough vetting progress, is to check against popular whim, and protect against foreign influences. And I'm going to step through and just basically qualify each of these points a little bit. In a letter from James Madison to George Washington, he wrote, "No one will deny that Virginia and Massachusetts have more weight and influence both within and without Congress than Delaware or Rhode Island. Under a system which would operate in many essential points without the intervention of state legislatures, the ease would be materially altered. A vote in the national councils from Delaware would have the same effect and value as one from the largest state in the Union." What states dominate our Congress today? California, Texas, New York, Massachusetts, still Massachusetts, Florida. So you can see the effect of allowing smaller states, maybe not to have as much weight to propose bills as these larger states, but if these larger states are just trampling on them with every bill that's being proposed, just repeatedly vetoing all the stuff that comes out of the larger states. So you can certainly see the benefit of that. In the Constitutional Convention, August 9, 1787, a gentleman from South Carolina by the name of Charles Pinckney, he actually is one of the more important founding fathers, at least of that time, as the Senate is to have the power of making treaties and managing our foreign affairs, there is a peculiar danger and impropriety in opening its doors to those who have foreign attachments. I'll speak on that more in a moment. Federalist Paper 39, James Madison writes, "The next relation is to the sources from which ordinary powers of government are to be derived. The House of Representatives will derive its powers from the people of America, and the people will be represented in the same proportion and on the same principle as they are in the legislature of the particular state, of a particular state. So far, the government is national and not federal. The Senate, on the other hand, will derive its powers from the states as political and co-equal societies, and these will be represented on the principle of equality in the Senate as they now are in the existing Congress. So far, the government is federal and not national. So that is an important point. As you may know, I sometimes don't just simply define myself as an independent, but I also sometimes define myself as an independent Federalist. This is kind of the context that I mean this, as opposed to the Federalist Party, which ultimately lost its way and thus is no longer. The connotation in terms of federal and national has changed a bit over the years. Federal is referring to a government in which most of the power is decentralized across sovereign states. In other words, the states form a confederation. The Constitution of the United States was called the Articles of Confederation, hence the term. National is referring to a government which most of the power is centralized. And I often make this point that is one of the distinctions between myself and both the Democrats and the Republicans. Although the Democrats and Republicans often differ on the details of their particular solutions, and sometimes they don't, ultimately both parties still have a national solution to things and don't necessarily agree with the concept of allowing local government to decide most everything. And so that is just basically a different metric by which political parties should be measured. In Madison's Congress, and I'll just give you this graphic here, Madison's Congress, the House of Representatives represented the people, and the Senate represented the states. 17th Amendment Congress, the Senate, and the House of Representatives both represent the people, and the states are not represented at all. Remember my earlier remark about the states being a fourth branch of government? This is another way in which the states were intended to be a fourth branch of government. The Senate would protect the best interests of the states. These are modern implications. The Senate protects the best interests of the states. States could pass bylaws requiring senators to relinquish all or most foreign assets before being appointed by the legislatures. So that's how, without a constitutional amendment, a state could protect the Senate from foreign influences. If we wanted to send Mr. Alexander back to the Senate, we could request that he divest his foreign holdings and invest in companies here in the state of Tennessee. Now, I'm not saying that that wouldn't have its own potential for corruption. The Senate was known to be corrupt prior to 1913. It's just that the interest in the corruption would be a local interest as opposed to turning our sovereignty over to the United Nations. So it's just another type of check and balance, and we do ultimately have to be honest with human nature. We're not going to totally solve the problems of corruption. We just need to pit problems against problems. States would effectively have veto by proxy over federal legislation. Laws adversely affecting state sovereignty would not pass. States control pay and appointment of senators. So in this model, actually, the states would be paying the senators, so the senators would be working for the states, not for the federal government. Large states such as California and New York would find it harder to get their way in Congress. After repeal of the 16th and 17th Amendments, the states would again be a fourth branch of government. Other implications. The parliamentarian, this is the gentleman that decides whether or not Congress is following, or at least the Senate is following their rules. Parliamentarian would be chosen by senators with the best interest of the states in mind. Currently, the parliamentarian works for Mr. Harry Reid. So you can understand the implication there. States would be represented in the Senate when members of the cabinet are nominated. So if the president's nominating a member of the cabinet to the EPA or the Department of the Interior that has a reputation of trampling on the states can just go, not happening. Because remember, the senator works for the state now. If the president does not look out for the best interests of the states would be represented in impeachment trials. Remember, the Senate ultimately tries impeachments, so if a president is just trampling all over the states, guess what? The senators work for the states, and they're the ones that ultimately decide whether or not the president keeps his job. When the Supreme Court justices are chosen, states would be represented to have the final say over the approval process. So we appoint a Supreme Court justice that does not believe in the sovereignty of the states. If you remember my earlier arguments about leverage obtained by repealing the 16th Amendment, then this would actually become less of an issue over time because the Supreme Court justices that we're nominating would be vetted by people who are looking out for the states, at least presumably.